Hey, everyone. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Don, and I've been married to Carla for over 8 years. We've got 2 amazing kids, a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl. From the outside looking in, we had the perfect little family. But life has a funny way of blindsiding you when you least expect it. Let me set the stage. Carla and I have always had these playful debates about who snores the loudest. She'd laugh, say it's all me, and I'd swear up and down that it was her. We'd joke about getting separate rooms someday when we're old and gray. A few weeks ago, I decided to settle this once and for all. I bought a cheap voice-activated recorder off Amazon, put it beside our bed, and told her it was just for fun. She rolled her eyes, called me petty, but we both laughed it off. For a couple of nights, nothing major happened, just some light snores from both of us. Life went on as usual. I was busy with work, dropping off and picking up the kids, and Carla had her usual routine. She's a real estate agent, so she's always on the go, showing houses and meeting clients. I never thought twice about her long hours because, well, that's just how her job is. Fast forward to last Friday. I'd completely forgotten about the recorder until I saw it sitting there while tidying up. Curious, I decided to give it a listen. I expected to hear more of our ridiculous snoring symphony, something I could playfully rub in Carla's face. But what I heard wasn't snoring. It started with faint rustling and some low voices, Carla's and a man's. At first, I thought maybe it was the TV, but then I realized the voices were coming from our bed. My stomach dropped. I kept listening, hoping there was some innocent explanation. Maybe I misheard, right? But no. It became painfully clear that Carla wasn't just talking to someone, she was with someone. And it wasn't me. The man's voice was unfamiliar, but Carla called him Steve. My mind went blank. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They joked, whispered, and did things I don't even want to think about. Then came the gut punch. Steve laughed and said something along the lines of, "How has Don not noticed yet? Those kids don't even look like him." That's when my world shattered. I sat there frozen, with the recorder still in my hand. My heart was racing, my chest tightening with every breath. I wanted to stop listening, but I couldn't. Carla's voice, so familiar yet so foreign in that moment, made my skin crawl. She laughed off Steve's comment, saying something like, "Don loves those kids. He'd never question it." The casualness of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. My love, my trust, the family we built, it was all a lie. I shut off the recorder and just sat there, staring at the wall. My mind was racing. Who was Steve? How long had this been going on? And the kids, my kids, were they even mine? I must have sat there for hours, trying to piece it all together. Memories started flooding back. Carla's sudden business trips, her late nights working on urgent deals, and how she'd become oddly protective of her phone over the past year. I'd brushed it all off, chalking it up to the stress of her job. I felt like a complete idiot. That night, I couldn't look at her. When she came home from work, she gave me her usual quick kiss on the cheek and went to check on the kids. I mumbled something about being tired and stayed in the living room. She didn't notice anything was off. Or maybe she didn't care. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices again. By morning, I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready. I needed more proof. Part of me hoped there was some crazy explanation, but deep down, I knew the truth. Over the next few days, I started digging. I checked our phone records, looked through our bank statements, and even went through her emails when she left her laptop open. Sure enough, there were clues everywhere. Hotel charges, dinner reservations for 2, and emails from Steve, long flirty ones that made me sick to my stomach. But the worst part? I found an email draft she must have forgotten to delete. In it, she talked about how torn she was between her family and what she had with Steve. She wrote about how much she loved me but wasn't sure if she could give him up. I wanted to scream. How could she write about love while doing this to me? I decided to keep playing dumb for a little while longer. If this was going to blow up, I needed to be prepared. I made an appointment with a lawyer and started researching DNA testing. If Steve's disgusting joke was true, I needed to know. A few nights later, I caught Carla in another lie. She said she was meeting a client for a late showing, but I already knew she wasn't. Her emails mentioned a date night with Steve at a downtown restaurant. I stayed home with the kids, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was falling apart. Around midnight, she came back, smelling like wine and carrying that smug look she always had after closing a deal. She climbed into bed without a second thought, while I lay there pretending to sleep. Every fiber of my being wanted to call her out right then and there, but I stayed silent. That recorder? It wasn't the last piece of evidence I'd collect. This time, I was going to make sure the truth came crashing down on her like a ton of bricks. By the end of the week, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I'd been running on fumes, barely eating, barely sleeping, and pretending like everything was fine for the kids. But inside, I was boiling. Every glance Carla gave me felt like a knife in the back. Friday night, the kids were in bed, and Carla was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. I sat across from her, just watching her. She finally noticed and looked up, laughing nervously. "What?" she asked, setting her phone down. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about us." That caught her off guard. "Us? Is something wrong?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "You tell me. You've been working a lot lately, staying out late, taking trips. It's like you're always somewhere else." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she straightened up. "Dawn, I've told you a million times, my job's demanding. You know how it is." "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I do. But here's the thing, I don't think it's just work keeping you busy." Her face froze for a split second before she laughed. It was forced, like she was trying to dismiss the conversation before it started. "What are you even saying? That I'm cheating on you? That's ridiculous. Is it?" I said, sitting back. "Because I know Carla. I know about Steve." Her face drained of color, and for the first time, she looked genuinely scared. But then just as quickly, she switched to anger. "Steve? You mean my client? You think I'm sleeping with him? Dawn, that's insane. He's a married man." Her audacity stunned me. She actually thought she could lie her way out of this. "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "I've seen the emails. I've heard the recording." Now she looked like she'd been slapped. "What recording?" she whispered. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and played a snippet of the audio. Just enough for her to recognize the voices. The color drained from her face again, and for a moment, I thought she might faint. "You went through my emails," she stammered, her voice trembling. "You recorded me? You made me," I yelled, slamming my hand on the coffee table. "Do you have any idea what it's like to find out your wife is sneaking around with another man? In our house? In our bed?" Carla jumped up, tears spilling down her face. "It's not what you think," she cried. "Steve and it's not serious. It's complicated. I never wanted to hurt you, Dawn. I swear." I laughed bitterly. "Not serious? So what is it? Fun? A hobby? Something to do between showing houses?" Her excuses kept coming, one after the other. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I love you, Dawn. I love our family. Steve, he doesn't mean anything to me." "Doesn't mean anything?" I shot back. "Then why has this been going on for months? Why are you lying to my face and sneaking out to be with him? And what about what he said about the kids?" She froze again. "What are you talking about?" I stared at her, my voice ice cold. "He said they don't look like me. He said they're not mine." Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for words. "That's not true," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dawn, I swear. The kids are yours. I would never lie about that." I didn't believe her. "Not anymore." "We'll see," I said, standing up. "Because I'm getting a DNA test. And if I find out those kids aren't mine, Carla." "Dawn, please," she begged, grabbing my arm. "Don't do this. Don't drag the kids into this." I yanked my arm away. "You dragged them into this the moment you decided to cheat in our bed. You don't get to play the victim now." I walked away before I could say anything else, leaving her sobbing in the living room. Upstairs, I checked on the kids, kissed their foreheads, and went to bed. I didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I called the DNA testing lab. It was time to find out the truth. The next few days were pure torture. After my confrontation with Carla, she tried everything to smooth things over. Apologies, promises, even tears, but I wasn't buying it. The damage was done, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate me back into complacency. I scheduled the DNA test for that Friday. I didn't tell Carla the exact date because I didn't trust her not to meddle. I swabbed my own cheek and carefully collected samples from the kids while they thought we were playing a game. It felt like betrayal, doing this behind their backs, but I had to know. The lab technician told me it would take a week to get the results. A week felt like a lifetime. In the meantime, I kept up appearances for the kids. Carla, on the other hand, was a wreck. She walked around the house with puffy eyes and a haunted look, barely speaking unless it was about the kids. I could tell she was terrified of what those test results might reveal. Good. She deserved to feel the weight of what she'd done. One night, after the kids were asleep, Carla cornered me in the kitchen. She looked fragile, holding her coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Dawn," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I've messed up. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know something." I crossed my arms and leaned against the counter, waiting. "I love you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I always have. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but it doesn't change how I feel about you. Or our family." I wanted to laugh. "You call sleeping with another man a mistake?" "Carla, this wasn't a one-night stand. This was an affair. Months of sneaking around, lying to my face. And you have the nerve to talk about love." She flinched at my words but pressed on. "Steve was, I don't even know, a distraction? An escape? But he never meant more to me than you. He was just there at a time when I felt lost. Lost." I shot back. "Lost enough to risk our marriage? To bring another man into our bed?" "I know it sounds awful," she admitted. "But I never stopped loving you, Dawn. I swear. And the kids, they're yours." "I know they are." "Words mean nothing now, Carla," I said coldly. "The test will tell me the truth. Until then, save your explanations." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. A small part of me wanted to comfort her, but the bigger part of me, angry, betrayed, wouldn't let me. I left her in the kitchen and went upstairs, locking the door behind me. The next morning, things were quieter. Carla gave me space, and I kept myself busy. But every moment I wasn't distracted, my mind went back to that recorder, those emails, and Steve's disgusting comment about the kids. Were they really mine? Could everything I'd built my life around be based on a lie? That Sunday, I took the kids out for ice cream and a movie, just to get away from the tension at home. Watching them laugh and argue over sprinkles made my chest ache. I loved them so much it hurt, but there was a small nagging voice in the back of my head. What if they aren't yours? What then? By Thursday, I was on edge. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, hoping it was the lab. Finally, on Friday afternoon, the call came. The results were in. My hands shook as I opened the email attachment. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. The words blurred for a moment before snapping into focus. Then I saw it. The results. And just like that, my entire world came crashing down again. Don't even know how long I stared at the screen. The words were clear as day, but my brain refused to process them. My son wasn't mine. My little boy, the one who clung to me when he was scared, who proudly called me his hero, wasn't biologically mine. My daughter was. That brought a fleeting wave of relief, but it was quickly swallowed by a flood of devastation. Half of my life, my love, my family, built on a lie. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I didn't know what to do, who to call, or where to go. For a split second, I thought about just walking out the door and disappearing. But then I heard their laughter from the living room. The kids were watching one of their favorite cartoons, blissfully unaware of the storm tearing through their father's soul. That sound grounded me. No matter what those results said, I couldn't abandon them. Not now. Not ever. But Carla? That was a different story. I put my phone down and took a deep breath. I could feel the anger building like a volcano, ready to erupt. I stormed into the living room, where Carla was sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone while the kids sat on the floor with their snacks. She glanced up at me, and her face immediately changed. She must have seen the fury in my eyes. "Kids," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Why don't you go play upstairs for a while? Daddy needs to talk to Mommy." They looked at me, then at Carla, sensing something was wrong. "But the show's not done," my son protested. "I'll pause it," I promised. Go on now. Please. Reluctantly, they got up and headed upstairs, their little feet thumping against the hardwood. As soon as they were out of earshot, I turned to Carla, who was already on edge. "Dawn," she began, her voice nervous. "What's going on?" I held up my phone, the email still open. "The results," I said flatly. "I got them back." Her face paled, and she immediately started shaking her head. "No. Don't do this." "They're not my son," I said, my voice breaking on the last word. "He's not my son, Carla." "How could you?" I couldn't even finish the sentence. My voice cracked, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. She stood up, reaching for me, but I backed away like her touch would burn me. "Dawn, please," she begged. "He's your son in every way that matters. You're his dad. Not biologically." I shouted, cutting her off. "Do you even understand what you've done? You lied to me. You lied to him. You've built this entire family on lies, Carla." Her own tears started falling. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, Dawn. I didn't know until recently." "Bull," I stopped myself, shaking my head. "Don't you dare stand there and tell me you didn't know there was a chance. You cheated on me, Carla. In the same house where our kids sleep. You didn't care about me or them or any of it." "It wasn't like that," she cried. I was young, confused. "Don't you dare play the victim," I roared. "This isn't about you anymore. This is about what you've done to this family. To me. To him." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. I was done. Done listening to her excuses, her lies, her pathetic attempts to save face. "You know what?" I said, my voice icy now. "You're going to explain this to him. To our son. You're going to look him in the eye and tell him why his whole life is a lie. And then you're going to pack your bags and get the hell out of my house." She looked at me in disbelief. "Dawn, no. Please. Don't do this. He's our son. He loves you." "And I love him," I said, my voice breaking again. "But you don't get to decide what's right anymore. You don't get to decide anything." I turned and left the room before I could lose it completely. Upstairs, I found the kids playing with Legos. My son looked up at me with his big innocent eyes, and I felt my heart shatter all over again. No matter what the results said, I would never stop being his dad. But Carla? She was done. I didn't sleep that night. After our blow-up in the living room, Carla retreated to the guest room. The house was eerily quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. My mind was racing, jumping between anger, heartbreak, and the terrifying question of how to handle this with the kids, especially my son. By morning, I'd made my decision. The truth needed to come out, no matter how much it hurt. If I waited too long, the kids would find out some other way, and I couldn't risk that. They deserved honesty. When Carla came downstairs, her face was puffy from crying. She looked at me with pleading eyes, but I cut her off before she could speak. "We're telling them today," I said firmly. Her lips quivered. "Dawn, please. They're too young. They won't understand. They're smarter than you think," I snapped. "And they deserve better than more lies." We agreed to talk after breakfast. I made pancakes, just like every other Saturday, trying to keep things as normal as possible. The kids were excited, arguing over who would get the first pancake, completely unaware of the bombshell about to drop. Once the plates were cleared, I called them into the living room. Carla sat stiffly on the couch, clutching a tissue. I sat across from her, and the kids plopped down between us, their bright little faces full of curiosity. "What's going on?" my daughter asked, sensing the tension. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "We need to talk about something very serious," I began. "Something about our family." My son tilted his head, his brow furrowed. "Are you mad at us?" I immediately shook my head. "No, buddy. This has nothing to do with you or your sister. It's about Mommy and me." Carla looked like she might faint. I glanced at her, silently telling her it was time. She hesitated, then wiped her eyes and began. "Kids," she said shakily, "your daddy and I love you very much. Nothing will ever change that. But I made a mistake. A big mistake." The kids exchanged confused looks. "What kind of mistake?" my daughter asked. Carla's voice broke. "Before your brother was born, I spent time with someone else. And because of that, we found out that Daddy isn't your biological father." The room went silent. My son's face scrunched up, trying to process her words. What does that mean? He asked. It means that even though I'm not the one who made you, I've been your dad your whole life, I said softly. And I always will be. His lip trembled. So you're not really my dad? I reached out and pulled him into a hug, my own tears spilling over. I am your dad, I said firmly. Nothing changes that. Not some stupid test, not anything. I'm the one who taught you how to ride your bike, who reads you stories every night, who cheers you on at your soccer games. That's what makes a dad. And I'll always be here for you. He clung to me tightly, tears soaking into my shirt. My daughter crawled into my lap, sniffling. But why would Mommy do that? She asked, her voice small and hurt. I looked at Carla, giving her the chance to answer. She broke down completely. I made a mistake, she sobbed. I was selfish, and I hurt all of you. I'm so sorry. The kids didn't say anything else. They just stayed in my arms, crying softly. I held them for what felt like forever, whispering reassurances, telling them how much I loved them. After a while, I sent them upstairs to play. They needed time to process, just like I did. Once they were gone, I turned to Carla, who was still sitting there, tears streaming down her face. I'll stay for them, I said coldly. But you're moving out. You can't fix this, Carla. Not with me. She nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. I'll pack my things. As she walked upstairs, I sat there in the empty living room, the silence deafening. My family was shattered, and I wasn't sure it would ever be whole again. But one thing was certain, I'd never stop being their dad, no matter what the DNA said. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Carla started packing. We didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say. She moved like a ghost through the house, her eyes red and swollen. In the morning, I told the kids Carla was going to stay somewhere else for a while. My daughter cried, clinging to her, while my son just sat silently, his face blank. It broke me, but I had to stay strong for them. Carla hugged the kids tightly before she left. When she tried to hug me, I stepped back. Goodbye, Carla, I said firmly. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked out the door. As it closed behind her, the weight of everything hit me. The house felt quieter, emptier. I looked at my kids, who were still watching the door, and forced a smile. We're going to be okay, I told them. I promise. Even if I wasn't sure how yet, I meant it. They deserved a dad who wouldn't let them down, no matter what. The first week without Carla was tough. The kids had a lot of questions, mostly my daughter, who didn't understand why Mommy wasn't coming back. My son stayed quiet, his usual lively personality replaced by a somber silence. That worried me more than anything. I threw myself into keeping things normal for them. Pancakes on Saturday. Movie night on Friday. I helped with homework, drove them to school, and tried to keep the sadness from creeping into my voice when I read bedtime stories. One night, as I tucked my son in, he finally spoke. Do you hate Mommy? He asked, his voice small. I paused, sitting on the edge of his bed. No, buddy. I'm really hurt by what she did, but I don't hate her. She's still your mom, and she loves you very much. Do you think she'll come back? He whispered. I didn't lie. I don't know. But even if she doesn't live here anymore, we're still a family. And I'll always be here for you. He nodded and hugged me tightly. It was a small step, but it gave me hope. Little by little, I was going to rebuild what Carla had broken. For them, and for me. A few weeks passed, and we were starting to find our rhythm. The kids seemed more settled, though there were still moments, like when my daughter asked if Mommy would come to her school play, that hit me hard. I told her I didn't know but promised I'd be there no matter what. One Saturday afternoon, while the kids were playing outside, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and froze. It was Carla. She looked different, tired, thinner, but still the woman I'd loved for so many years. Dawn, she said softly, clutching a small bag. Can I come in? My first instinct was to slam the door, but I saw the kids watching from the yard. I stepped aside. You've got 10 minutes. We sat at the kitchen table. She looked around, her eyes lingering on the kids' drawings on the fridge. I just wanted to drop this off, she said, placing a small notebook on the table. It's a journal. For the kids. I thought, maybe they'd want to know how much I'm thinking about them. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw the Carla I once knew, the one who made me laugh, who stayed up with me when I was sick. But then the weight of her betrayal crashed back. "I'll give it to them," I said stiffly. "Is that all?" She hesitated. "Dawn, I know I can't fix this. But I hope someday you'll let me try." I shook my head. "You broke something that can't be fixed, Carla. I'll always put the kids first, but for us? There's no going back." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and left without another word. As the door closed behind her, I sat there, staring at the journal, wondering if her regrets came too late. For me, they did. For the kids? Only time would tell. After Carla's visit, I decided it was time to focus on the future. Dwelling on her betrayal wasn't going to help me or the kids. I tucked the journal away for now, unsure if they were ready for it. Instead, I turned my energy toward making life as stable as possible. The kids had their ups and downs. My daughter started drawing pictures of our family, always with me, her brother and her, but sometimes without Carla. My son was quieter, but he'd started asking me to play soccer with him in the yard. It was small progress, but I clung to it. I reached out to a family therapist, someone who could help us navigate this mess. Our first session was awkward, lots of long silences and nervous glances. But eventually, the kids opened up, and so did I. It felt good to say some of the things I'd been bottling up, even if they didn't have easy answers. One night after a session, my son came into the living room while I was folding laundry. "Dad," he said hesitantly, "are we gonna be okay?" I put down the shirt I was holding and knelt in front of him. "Yeah, buddy. We're gonna be okay. It's just going to take time." "Are you sure?" he asked, his big eyes searching mine. "I'm sure," I said, pulling him into a hug. "We've got each other, and that's what matters." For the first time in weeks, he smiled, a real smile. And for the first time, I felt like we were going to make it through this. It wouldn't be easy, but step by step, we were moving forward. A month after Carla's visit, a letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was hers. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to read what she had to say. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside, the letter was handwritten and emotional, filled with regret and apologies. She admitted to her selfishness and how deeply she had hurt all of us. She wrote about how much she missed the kids and how she hoped I'd let her be a part of their lives again. "Dawn," she wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you'll find it in your heart to let me prove that I can be better for the kids. They're my whole world, and even if I can't fix what I've done, I want to be there for them." I set the letter down, staring at it for a long time. It was clear she was trying to make an effort, but it didn't erase the damage. I wasn't ready to decide anything yet, but I knew one thing: I'd do whatever was best for the kids. That night, I reread the letter. Part of me wanted to tear it up, but another part wondered if letting her try, for their sake, might be the right thing to do. I decided to sit with it for a few days before making any decisions. Some wounds take longer to heal, and I wasn't going to rush it. For now, my focus stayed on the kids and the little moments that kept us moving forward. The letter weighed on me for days. Every time I saw it on the kitchen counter, I felt torn. On one hand, I wanted to protect the kids from more pain. On the other, I knew cutting Carla out completely might hurt them in the long run. After all, no matter what she did, she was still their mom. I brought it up in therapy during a one-on-one session. "How do I even begin to figure this out?" I asked the therapist. "She says she wants to be there for the kids, but how do I trust her after everything?" The therapist nodded thoughtfully. "This isn't about rebuilding trust with her as a partner. It's about co-parenting in a way that's healthy for your children. Right now, they need both stability and honesty. If you decide to let Carla have a role in their lives, it has to be on terms that prioritize their well-being, and yours." That advice stuck with me. When I got home, I reread the letter again, this time with less anger clouding my judgment. Carla didn't deserve a second chance with me, but the kids? That was a different story. I decided to talk to Carla. I texted her and told her to meet me at a neutral place, a coffee shop a few towns over. She agreed immediately, and 2 days later, we sat across from each other in a quiet corner of the cafe. She looked nervous, like she was expecting me to lash out. I didn't. I kept my tone calm and steady as I laid out my thoughts. "I read your letter," I began. "And I've thought a lot about what's best for the kids. They love you, and I won't take you away from them. But this is going to be on my terms. If you're serious about being in their lives, we need clear boundaries." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she nodded. Of course. Whatever it takes. I explained what I needed, regular visits with the kids, but not at the house, at least not for now. No more lies, no more excuses. And therapy. She'd need to join us for family counseling sessions to help rebuild trust with the kids. Carla agreed to everything. I'll do whatever I have to, Dawn. I just want to be there for them. The first visit was scheduled for the following weekend at a park near our house. I told the kids about it a few days beforehand, keeping the conversation as positive as I could. My daughter was excited, but my son seemed more hesitant. "What if she leaves again?" he asked quietly. I knelt down and put a hand on his shoulder. "She's working on being better, buddy. And no matter what happens, you've always got me. I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. I hated that Carla had put him in this position, but all I could do was be there for him and hope that she wouldn't let him down again. When Saturday came, the kids were buzzing with energy as we arrived at the park. Carla was already there, sitting on a bench, clutching a tote bag. She stood up when she saw us, smiling nervously. "Mommy," my daughter yelled, running into her arms. Carla knelt down and hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. My son hung back, holding my hand. I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze and whispered, "It's okay. Go say hi." He hesitated, then slowly walked over. Carla hugged him too, but he didn't cling to her the way his sister did. His guard was still up, and I couldn't blame him. The visit went better than I expected. Carla had brought a picnic, and the kids were thrilled with the sandwiches, snacks, and little surprise gifts she had packed. They laughed and played on the swings while Carla and I sat on the bench, keeping an eye on them. "Thank you," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "For what?" I asked. "For letting me be here," she said. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'll do everything I can to make it right." I didn't respond. Words weren't enough to fix this, only actions would show if she meant it. As the sun started to set, I called the kids over. "Time to head home, guys," I said. My daughter pouted, but my son just nodded, looking tired. Carla hugged them both goodbye, promising to see them next weekend. On the drive home, my daughter chattered excitedly about the day, but my son stayed quiet. When we got home, he finally spoke. "Do you think she's really sorry?" he asked. I looked at him in the rearview mirror, seeing the worry in his eyes. "I think she's trying," I said honestly. "And sometimes, that's all we can ask for." It wasn't a perfect day, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to piece together something new, something that worked for the kids, even if things would never be the same for Carla and me. The weeks that followed were a delicate balancing act. Carla showed up for every scheduled visit, usually at the park or a nearby community center. She was attentive and kind with the kids, doing her best to reconnect with them. My daughter warmed up to her quickly, but my son remained cautious. He'd join in the activities, but there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It was like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Carla joined us in therapy as promised. The first session with her was tense, to say the least. My son barely spoke, and my daughter asked questions that left Carla in tears. "Why did you leave us?" she asked bluntly one day. "I didn't want to," Carla said, her voice trembling. "But I made mistakes that hurt Daddy, and I needed to take some time to fix those mistakes." My daughter frowned, clearly not satisfied. "But you promised you wouldn't leave again, right?" Carla nodded fervently. "I promise, sweetheart. I'll do everything I can to be here for you." The therapist helped guide the conversations, making sure the kids felt heard and that Carla didn't shy away from the tough questions. Slowly, session by session, the tension began to ease. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, a few months into this new routine, my son surprised me. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when he walked in, holding his soccer ball. "Dad," he said, "can we talk?" "Of course," I replied, setting down the dish towel. "What's up?" He hesitated, looking down at the ball in his hands. I think I'm ready to let Mom come to one of my games." His words caught me off guard. He'd been so adamant about keeping her at arm's length, and now he was offering an olive branch. I knelt down to his level, my chest tight with a mix of pride and sadness. "That's a big decision, buddy," I said gently. "What made you decide?" He shrugged. "I've been watching her with Lily, and she looks like she's trying. And I kinda miss her being at my games." I pulled him into a hug, blinking back tears. "I think that's a brave choice," And I'm proud of you. The following Saturday, Carla came to his soccer game. She cheered louder than anyone, clapping and shouting encouragement as he played. I watched from a few feet away, noticing the small smile on his face when she called his name after he scored a goal. It was the first time in months I'd seen him look so genuinely happy. After the game, he ran over to her, holding the game ball. "Thanks for coming," he said shyly. Her eyes filled with tears as she hugged him. I wouldn't miss it for the world. That day marked a turning point. Carla started to feel more like a part of the kids' lives again, though the boundaries I'd set remained firmly in place. She didn't come to the house, and our interactions stayed civil but distant. It was clear to both of us that while co-parenting was possible, there was no future for us as a couple. For the kids, though, the change was noticeable. My daughter's drawings began to include Carla again, and my son started to open up more during therapy. The wounds weren't gone, but they were starting to heal, little by little. As for me, I was learning to let go of the anger. It didn't mean I forgave Carla, but I wasn't letting her betrayal consume me anymore. My focus stayed on the kids, on giving them the stability and love they needed to move forward. And for the first time in a long while, I started to believe that we'd be okay. Maybe even better than okay. Months passed, and our new routine started to feel like normal life. Carla continued her visits with the kids, staying consistent and dependable. Therapy sessions became less tense, and the kids grew more comfortable expressing themselves. My son even started to crack jokes with Carla again, though I could still see the cautiousness in his eyes. For me, things were different. The pain of Carla's betrayal had dulled, replaced by a kind of acceptance. I no longer expected apologies or explanations from her. Instead, I focused on what I could control, being the best father I could and rebuilding a life that didn't revolve around the past. One evening, as I sat in the kitchen reviewing bills, my daughter came in with her drawing pad. "Daddy, look," she said, thrusting the paper into my hands. It was a picture of our family, me, her, my son, and Carla, standing together in front of a house. There was something in her smile as she watched me look it over, a quiet hope that this was her version of a happy ending. "It's beautiful, sweetie," I said, ruffling her hair. "You've got real talent. Do you think we'll ever be like that again?" she asked, her voice so soft it broke my heart. I knelt down, meeting her eyes. "I think our family will always be a little different now. But different doesn't mean bad. We're still a family, no matter what." She hugged me tightly, and I felt the weight of her little arms around my neck. It was in moments like this that I found my strength. As the kids adjusted, I realized it was time for me to start looking outward too. For months, my world had revolved around work and parenting, with no time or energy for anything else. But now the idea of meeting new people, or even just reconnecting with old friends, felt less daunting. A buddy from work invited me to a local trivia night, and though I hesitated, I eventually agreed. It was awkward at first, being in a social setting after everything that had happened. But as the evening went on, I found myself laughing, feeling a little lighter than I had in months. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The real test came during the holidays. Christmas was always a big deal in our family, and the thought of splitting time with the kids weighed heavily on me. Carla and I agreed that the kids would spend Christmas Eve with her and Christmas morning with me. When I dropped them off at her apartment that evening, my daughter ran ahead, excited to show Carla the Christmas crafts she'd made at school. My son lingered by the car, looking unsure. "You okay, bud?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, kicking at the snow. "It's just weird." I crouched down beside him. "I know it's different this year, but we're going to make the best of it, okay? I'll see you bright and early tomorrow." He nodded and gave me a quick hug before following his sister inside. As I drove home, the quiet of the car felt heavier than usual, but I reminded myself that this was part of the new normal. On Christmas morning, the kids burst into the house with their usual energy, chattering about the gifts they'd opened at Carla's. We spent the day baking cookies, building Lego sets, and watching Christmas movies. By the time they were asleep that night, the house was filled with warmth and laughter, a reminder that even in the face of so much change, joy was still possible. Later that night, I sat by the fire, sipping a cup of coffee and staring at the lights on the tree. The past year had been the hardest of my life, but sitting there in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. We weren't the family we used to be, and maybe we never would be. But we were still a family, just in a different way. And for now, that was enough. A year had passed since the day I discovered the truth that changed everything. It had been a year of heartbreak, anger, and uncertainty, but also one of growth, resilience and healing. The kids were doing well. My daughter's laughter had returned to its full brightness, and my son was starting to trust again, even if his guard wasn't fully down. Carla and I had found a rhythm in co-parenting. She stayed consistent, attending the kids' events, showing up to therapy, and keeping her promises. I wouldn't say we were friends, but we were civil for the sake of the kids. And that was enough. One Saturday, I took the kids to the park. It was a beautiful spring day, the air fresh with the scent of blooming flowers. My son kicked a soccer ball around while my daughter climbed the jungle gym. Watching them, I felt a sense of pride. Despite everything, they were thriving. As they played, I thought about the life we were building. It wasn't the one I had envisioned when Carla and I first got married, but it was ours now. And in some ways, it was stronger because of what we'd been through. Later that night, as I tucked them in, my son looked up at me and said, "Dad, I think we're going to be okay." I smiled, my chest tightening with emotion. "Yeah, buddy," I said softly. "We are." After the kids were asleep, I sat alone in the living room, looking through old photos on my phone. Pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, moments when I thought life was perfect. I didn't feel the sharp sting of betrayal anymore, just a bittersweet ache for what was lost. I opened the drawer where I'd kept Carla's journal for the kids. I hadn't shown it to them yet, I'd been waiting for the right time. But now, I felt ready. That night, I left the journal on the table where they'd see it in the morning. It wasn't about forgiving Carla or forgetting what she'd done. It was about giving the kids every piece of love they could have, even if some of it came from her. They deserve that. Life isn't about rebuilding what was lost, it's about creating something new. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew one thing for sure: I had my kids, and they had me. Together, we'd face whatever came next. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt a quiet sense of hope. Not the naive kind I'd had before, but a stronger, steadier hope born from everything we'd survived. This was our new beginning, and we were ready to write the next chapter, together.